People, Deluded, I'm back again. Obviously it's a poor day in London, it's raining, but it's my lunch break and videos have to get made and videos have to come out. So I'm spending my lunch break with you guys again. Forgive me for any background noises and anything I can't control, but let's crack on with a couple of things. First, I actually didn't want to speak about it first, and I wanted to do it in a separate vid, but let's cover Xhaka again. Now, Xhaka, again, I keep saying I don't want to speak about Xhaka and whatnot, but it's going to keep overshadowing this club at least for the next couple of days. For me, I know I gave my initial reaction and I made a video about it there and then, but I've had time to kind of read through it again and again and consider all of his comments. And a lot of you in my comments and a lot of people I've spoken to in general have threw up some interesting points. The first one will be that allegedly some of what he said was lost in translation. A bit of that is apparently a lot of people are saying when it's translated in German or the native language it was written in, there's a bit of a emotional feel to it rather than the kind of blasé feel it currently has. Now, I'm not going to keep going into it. For me, Xhaka would never play for this club again. If he doesn't feel he should apologise for certain things, he shouldn't apologise, really and truly. But he could have given more of an he didn't have to fully apologise if he doesn't want to, even though I believe he should, but he could have been more empathetic towards the supporters that were supporting him, that he vaguely acknowledged people, and the people that didn't take it too far. Like I said, apology probably comes too little too late in my opinion, although a lot of you have said good comments that it was good to let the dust settle. Personally, I feel he should have came out the next day and said this. And I've also got to thinking, beyond the obvious, people, it leads me to believe, obviously the club tried to get him allegedly to come out with something on the Monday or the Tuesday, and it wasn't said, and eventually he's come out and said something. Now, is this off his own accord? Has the club forced him into this? Obviously he's brought something out, but is this completely different from what the club initially wanted him to say, and he's finally said, all right, I have to say something, but I'm not going to say what the club wants? Either way, I don't feel the club, Xhaka, and probably Xhaka's people and people behind him are all on the same page. Also as well, one thing that's escaped me is the lack of a fine. Now, there was talk of his mental health and all of these sort of things at question. For me, he should have accepted a fine, whether he believes he should have a fine or not. Him as the captain, he should have, while it's a half-assed apology, but he acknowledges he's done wrong. You should hold your hands up and say, you know what, away from the fans, I let my teammates down by throwing the armband and kind of taking long to come off the field, making it harder for them than it has to be. I'm gonna pay a fine to Arsenal, or pay a fine because my role as captain, I shouldn't have put them in that predicament. And for me as well, obviously mending relations with fans is not gonna, him and Xhaka is probably gonna be tired, it's probably gonna be ruined already, people. There's no way of improving that. But I feel if he came out, and I don't know, you don't have to do it, but if it was me, I would have reacted like Xhaka, but then I probably would have said, you know what, I'm going to give my match day's wages to a charity, or we're funding Arsenal tickets or something to just get a good bit of PR with the fans in it, because we all know Xhaka is going to get booed even more. The agendas are going to be there even more now, and if Xhaka is reinstated back into the side, the next bad game he has, obviously the Wolves are going to come out times 10, and I don't want this to become a circus more so than it already has, people. So like I said, the lack of the sanction, people, is what's there for me. I'll probably do another video about it, but apparently Emery didn't even want to name Xhaka captain initially, so that throws that up for debate. But away from Xhaka, the Telegraph, have come out with some, and the Independent and the Telegraph have come out with some things to say. Firstly, we'll start with the Independent. There is no current will to sack Emery, but many of the wind is doing a madness, but many of the hierarchy do feel content that they did not extend his contract in the summer. They are just as now content to decide on his future at the end of the season. Some players, including some of the more senior players, are just not having Emery. They wonder whether he's even that good. There are plenty that doubt his tactics. Emery doesn't seem to want to work on their weaknesses, and it's clear to see. I mean, Emery, he said he's got the tactics and the analysis and all of these things, but he's been slow to improve it. A blind man could see the minute you take this Arsenal job over, it doesn't matter how you do it, you've got to improve the defensive record and how we look to defend, and just the club's recent culture with defending. You change that, you change our away form, people. It's not as white and black as that, but clearly many of our problems is a lack of being able to defend, lack of an inability to hold leads and things, and there just hasn't been a blueprint in regards to defending. Especially now you've got Saliba coming next year, you've got Holding, and you've got Kieran Tierney. These are young players that should be going into a defensive system that gels, and then we could say, yeah, we've got better players, we're going to defend better, when it's not as white and black as that. Van Dijk could come in Arsenal's defence and he'd get torn apart. obviously his quality would show. But do you think Van Dijk would be able to defend as good as he can for Liverpool if Matip couldn't defend and hold a line? If the fullbacks didn't know what they're doing? If the keeper didn't? If the midfield didn't help? We need to stop looking at one man in many fabrics of this team to change everything. But that's telling. The lack of offensive output, beyond the fact that we're scoring good goals, because I mean we've got 2 top quality strikers and whatnot, and now Martinelli, who's excluding Aubameyang and Lacazette's our top goal scorer. Goals have been masking games. We're not putting together pretty individual patterns of play and whatnot. And we heard every excuse with he needs his own players, he needs time, he needs this. It's not been there. And there's even more than that. You don't know what Emery's trying to do. It changes week in, week out. I like that he likes to change teams, but there's a difference between tinkering and tinkering to the point where you're damaging. So lack of coaching philosophy and improving in both the attacking and the defensive for me. Lack of overview of the blueprint of what he wants to install. For me, the statistics are there. We're allowing record shots and we're conceding record goals. We're dropping leads. 2 or 3 in the last 11 games. We've been 2-0 up and dropped points. Before that, it only happened occasional times in the previous 300. I said that in the previous vid. We're shooting less. You don't really know what this Arsenal team's about. And if we're having the question marks, the players are. Again, I believe in a freedom within a framework. You have one set way of doing things, and then how you might change it to how you play City and how you play these teams. But you can't be doing 4-4-2 one week, 4-3-3 the next, diamond the next, this and that, without any sort of primary way of playing. And the players have got to have question marks. There's no way around it. Emery is a good manager. He's won Europa League titles. He is it. But has he got the credentials to move this club forward or get us to that next level? You have to say no on current evidence. He's been backed. He's been allowed to marginalise the squad. 1 minute Ozil's in, then he's out. He's been allowed to bring people in, take people out, persist with the players that were already here that he wants. He's had time now, people. This is his squad. He spent 70-odd million, whether it was him or not. If he doesn't get top 4, it's his hill to die on. I just said earlier, apparently he didn't want to name Xhaka captain. That leads me to believe, what is Emery doing? Because you've got to have conviction. If you didn't want to name Emery Xhaka captain in the first place, then what are you doing, people? Obviously, you can say as well, I'd say my point is I'm starting to believe, like, obviously, we can question mark his tactics and stuff, but you also have to wonder, what if Emery is... What if what he wants to introduce to the team, he's trying? What I just said and what you want to see, what if he is trying that, people, but he's not able to because of his inability to communicate effectively with his players? For instance, we hear 2 hours plus of video analysis from his time at Valencia. I don't know, I'm just speculating. Is there a case of potentially too much detail? Players have too much information to take on. Footballers do have short attention spans, and I think in general you should just look to get the key points across. So is there a way with how we're communicating and things like that? Because for someone that talked about being cerebral, protagonist, on the front foot, cold-blooded video analysis who leaves nothing to chance and knows everything about opposition and players, you're not seeing none of that, people. And if senior players are having question marks in that squad, it's going to rub off onto other people. Like, I'm not saying Mustafi's a ringleader, but Mustafi's been marginalised, rightly so. I'm not criticising that, but Mustafi's name, from what I hear, Mustafi's a decent voice in that change room. If Mustafi don't like Emery, on top of the obvious and the other people having question marks, it's going to rub off. You look at Torreira's situation, you look at Ozil, you look at Xhaka's now, who Emery is fully right with what he's doing, and Xhaka should be fined and whatnot. He's saying, man, you good. Xhaka should be fined and whatnot, people, but 1 minute Emery, you hear the players are backing Xhaka, then Emery's in a difficult sort of pickle. Does he back the player and bring Xhaka back in, and the fans get onto him, or vice versa? So he's going to need to grow a pair and be true to his principles. You've also heard as well, which I think is quite disrespectful from the young players as well, is the young players, many of the club's younger players now openly do impressions of Emery in a way that is more cynical than those light-hearted good evening internet memes. The greeting is one of the few elements that give the manager a bit of public personality, but one of the many elements some of his squad will, in the words of one training ground source, mercilessly take the piss out of, pardon my language, people. Well, some of that is typical behaviour under any boss. It is typical of a club where his very direction and authority is under question. And I must admit, I did think a lot of that, on top of Ljungberg deserving a promotion, I did think Ljungberg was promoted on top of the obvious to be an effective communicator for the young player, because you have heard there's problems with how Emery gets his instructions across. And I also do think at the time, young players weren't getting chances when Longberg was brought in, excluding Guendouzi. A lot of that was to make them feel, yo, listen, there's a pathway here, and potentially to help them, because you were hearing a lot of it was Longberg's suggestions in regards to who should get chances, excluding Xhaka. Now, I think that's disrespectful from the young players. A lot of them have not made it yet for as good as they are. I don't know the individuals, so I'm not going to name them. I think that's very disrespectful, and I think a lot of them should take a long, hard look at themselves. But it is what it is, people. There's no smoke without fire. Obviously, every manager gets taken the mick out of. There's a difference between banter and being vindictive, but it comes down to authority. A lot of it's probably light-hearted banter, but if young players are taking the mick out of you, senior players are taking the mick out of you, members of the hierarchy allegedly are having question marks, it's not going to spell like it's going to end well for Emery, and he's going to need to down his sword. 1 minute he's making Xhaka captain, he's defending him. You're hearing reports coming out from the Athletic, apologies people, that he doesn't really feel Xhaka like that. So what hill is he dying on? If he wants to play Ozil, play him. If you don't want to play him, don't play him. If you want to play attacking, play attack. If you want to defend, defend. I think Emery is trying to, from what I look at, it looks like we're not working, we haven't worked on enough of the key things, but I'm starting to believe we're trying to do everything and not improving at anything really, because you have to question what we're doing in terms of training people, because there's no identity in this team, and it is what it is. I don't think we should be winning league titles, but we should be putting up more of a fight for the top five, top four position. Sorry, we're fifth. I think we're only 4 points off the top four. So while we can't move up if we win, there's still something to play for. So again, Emery, if he doesn't get top four, he has to go, because it's not even a thing where you can see a blueprint and coaching and things to say, all right, cool, he's our man, we see a vision, because you don't see a vision by Emery. I want Emery to do well in the sense that any Arsenal fan, nobody wants him to fail. I want him to do well even more that now that we've been linked with Jose as well. Now, I love Jose, but I don't want him at the club, people. But it's not going to spell well for Emery, because you're not looking at what he's done, and it is looking very much like he's hoodwinked people at the interview. If we don't, his initial interview, if we don't beat Wolves, people, we're in a difficult situation as a club. So I hope we get the result we desire, people. But on that note, I'm going to get out of here. I need to go and get some lunch. People, DG, I'm out.